And Aaron, in the tradition of Phreology Friday, what is in your glass tonight?
Yeah, so this is I forget the brand. I'm terrible with that. But it's mango habanero whiskey,
Okay.
just straight. But it's
Nice.
like 70 proof or something, not 80 proof. So you know,
Well, for me, I'm drinking Uncle Nearest 1884 straight whiskey on the rocks
right on.
because it's Friday and I ain't got shit to do. So, man, how was your week before we get started? How was your week?
Yeah, it was a good week. It was a good week. Normal,
Yeah,
which for me is nice.
nice. Yeah, when it's not all sideways and dysfunctional, right?
Yep, yep. How about yours?
You know what? My week was actually pretty good. I spent the week in Miami. It was a
Yeah,
work related function,
nice.
and didn't get to do anything touristy. We did a lot of a lot of talking, a lot of presenting, a lot of eating, a lot of drinking, and just camaraderie with the team. So it was good. Didn't get to do a whole lot of touristy stuff, but hey, that's okay. Um, but then I got back last night, and so today, man took me out for a wonderful seafood dinner, and
Nice.
we had margaritas while we were eating, and then having this Uncle Nearest. So my head's screwed on pretty good right now.
Yeah, yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that it's on me to talk about the topic tonight
Yeah.
because we were talking about what we're going to talk about, and uh, I called this episode "It's Better to Travel," and the point that I'm trying to make is that there's a statistic that says that 80% of people in the United States never live farther than 50 miles from where they're born.
Mm,
And there are people, I mean, why? I would say that probably half, half of the country probably hasn't traveled beyond their own state.
hmm.
And there's probably a significant portion that have never traveled beyond their own immediate geography. And when you start thinking about people who have traveled the entire width and breadth and depth of the United States and Canada and North America, or and then people who have actually traveled beyond the borders of the United States to have seen some things. Um, and what am I getting at? There are people out here that have this really twisted worldview that America is like the be all, the end all of everything.
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, like for as fucked up as America is sometimes, this is my homeland and I love it, you
Hmm.
know. But I am grateful. I am grateful for the Navy. I'm grateful for the oil and gas industry. I'm grateful for IT and the SAP space and all of that because through all of these, I have had the opportunity to see most of the world. Oh, and then also my time in ministry, right? I've had the opportunity to see most of the world.
Hmm.
And because of that, I think that I have a unique perspective on not only my life, but on the world in general
Hmm.
and America's place in it specifically.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of people kind of get hung up on what they believe about their country. They believe things because they've been brainwashed or indoctrinated into thinking a certain way, and they've never had the perspective of seeing beyond the tip of their nose.
Hmm.
So when we're talking about a subject for tonight, that's really what hit me. Going to Miami, and part of the thing is, Aaron, was that some people, I told some people, hey, I'm going to Miami, and everybody's like, oh my God, that's going to be awesome. And you know what my response was? It was like, man, you know, I mean, I've been to Miami in my lifetime, I don't know, 100 times,
Hmm.
100 times. So there's nothing there that I haven't seen.
Right.
Um, Now, is Miami a beautiful place? It absolutely is, and it's full of beautiful people.
Hmm.
But it was like, okay, basically when I think the last trip that I took where I really got excited about going was when I went to London the last time in 2020.
Hmm.
That was the last trip that I think I really got excited about, and the reason I was excited about it because I've been to London, I don't know, maybe 100 times in my lifetime, um, but I hadn't been in over 20 years.
Hmm.
So visiting and seeing it 20 years later, and there were some things that were eye openers. Like for example, it used to be you could go to Buckingham Palace and you could actually do things to to fuck with the guards.
Right. Yeah. Right.
You can't do that now.
Really?
Yeah, I mean
Wow.
you can't even get close to
Wow.
Buckingham Palace now unless you're a guest of the royal family.
Right.
I mean
Interesting.
they have like these hydraulic um, vehicle barriers that rise and fall depending on who's coming through. There are gates around the whole thing, and there's a perimeter. It's like probably about 50 yards from the gate to the
Wow.
palace.
Wow.
So you don't just see everything like you used to, and then there are things like the London Eye that wasn't there when I went there 20 plus years ago. So there's that, and the Shard, and you know excuse me, there was a lot there that was different. But what I'm getting at is that um, being having traveled to London and having traveled extensively through England, I have a different perspective about England and about the English and about the royal family and about the difference between the urban centers like London versus industrial or shipping cities like Southampton or Portsmouth, right? And you get a different perspective on things, and and it was funny. This was during the time that Cult 45 was in office, and I had so many people, so many English people that just asked me, you know, what the fuck are you guys doing over there? They were
Hmm.
just like,
Yeah.
just really aghast at what the political climate in the U.S. So I say all this to say that having traveled the world is one of the best things that's ever happened to me
Hmm.
because I have a different perspective. I have a perspective about my place in the world, my country's place in the world, my culture's place in the world, and all of these different things. And one of the things that travel is one of the most humbling experiences that you'll ever have
Hmm.
because you'll realize that that your view of things is not so widely held.
Hmm.
So anyway, that's my setup for all of this, and
Yeah.
I hope I didn't stumble over it too much, but that's
No,
kind
it's good.
of
No, I think if people wanted to get exposed to, if they wanted some multicultural exposure, and they can't, afford to travel to every continent on the earth, Miami would be a good place to start.
yeah,
I remember first time going to Miami, and there, just so many cultures, Jamaican culture and
Cuban,
Puerto Rican and
yeah,
Cuban, and also, there's a very prominent Jewish culture
yeah,
in Miami as well. Um, and I, last time we were there 2 years ago, I think we took Ubers everywhere, but I think we went the first time in 1994, And driving in Miami was an experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I don't
didn't
know that
drive this
Colorado
time.
Springs has gotten so bad now. I'd rather drive anywhere in the country than Colorado Springs. But I remember coming from Pueblo, Colorado, and driving in Miami. It's like, Jesus Christ, man. You do not stop at a yellow light for sure.
Yeah.
And I remember watching somebody miss the exit off the freeway and just put their car in reverse.
Yep. Yep.
So that's an experience in and of itself. Um, so no, I agree with you. It's an interesting thing because it's interesting how the brain really does get locked into patterns of normalcy as though the map is the territory. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're only ever exposed to people that think like you or cultures that are similar to yours, or like you said, you never travel, more than 50 miles outside of your own, where you grew up and whatever. And some of that has to do, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of that has to do for families because of poverty and things like that. They can't
Yep.
afford to take trips. But it's very easy to think that your way of thinking about the world is the way that the world is. And then you become really susceptible to narratives of other places that you've never been to, right? So,
Yeah.
like you said, the whole American exceptionalism thing. And one of the real privileges of my life, I mean, top 5 easy, maybe top 3, was that not only did, I'm not as well traveled as you are, but I've been a lot of places, a
Yeah.
lot of different places, a lot of different cultures, many times. And, but when we started our church, we had the benefit of founding our own church and nonprofit organization. So we were able to set the bylaws and all that stuff. And one of the things that we said was that we were only going to work with, and I didn't know anybody, I'm just from Pueblo, Colorado. I didn't know anybody in other parts of the world, but we had set the intention that we were only going to work with indigenous groups, that we would not work with, and I don't know why we did this. Like, I didn't have necessarily a deep conviction about American colonialism or anything like that, but it's just like, if we're going to work with, any mission support or anything that we do, number one, it has to be with indigenous groups.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, I have somebody, not just me, somebody from our organization or somebody that we know really well has to validate the efficacy and authenticity of what's going on over there. Which
Yeah.
is why it was real easy. You know how it was when you're a pastor. You get everybody from all over the world
Yep.
messaging you with their orphanages and their projects and their stuff like that.
Yep.
And it was just real easy to say no to all of that because, I knew of a situation in Kenya. We did a lot of work. Most of our work that we did in Africa, not all of it, but most of it was in Kenya. And my first exposure to Kenya was a guy that came before I was pastoring, a guy that came through our church, and he showed us pictures of orphanages and crusades that he did, and people that he was feeding and all this stuff. Well, come to find out, when I actually went to Kenya, and so we gave an offering there,
Mm-hmm.
and then I actually went to Kenya a few years later, and I'm working with the people there, and I mentioned this guy's name. Well, come to find out, this guy would go around to everybody else's ministries and take pictures and then go to
Oh
the
boy.
US and say it was his, what do you want to call it? Field or vineyard or whatever, labors,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and raise money off of it. And all of it went in his pocket and, sending his kids to Ivy League schools and stuff like that. So, that was one of the reasons. It's like, okay, we have to actually go there and verify it. So I said all that to say that I was very, very fortunate. I have some funny memories, man. I was very fortunate to be able to not just visit these places, but really um, get into the culture, stay with people who lived there. And, like I remember the first time I went to Poland. I went to Poland, I want to say like 2003, maybe.
Yeah.
And I go with a team of Americans, right? I'm part of a team.
Mm-hmm.
I get off the plane and I meet these two Polish dudes, and they said, okay, you're going to go up to the northern part of the country, and you're going to host or you're going to preach for a guy who's the mayor of the city. So he's a pastor, but he's also the mayor of this city.
Yep.
And you're going to stay with him. You know, you can do 3 days there, and then you're going to come back to Warsaw and do some meetings in Warsaw, whatever. So I get in the car with these guys, and we're 30 minutes from the airport, and I'm trying to have a conversation with them, right? And I realized pretty quickly they knew very, very little English.
Yeah.
So, and here's an example. I was like, I'm trying to figure out what I'm walking into, right? So I'm like, so tell me about your churches. What? Tell me about your churches. 17 years. No. And I said, if I were to say to you, how are you? Do you understand how are
Yeah.
you? They're
Uh-huh.
like, yes, fine. Okay. They would say, okay. Because that seems to be international. Okay,
Yeah.
seems to be international.
Yep.
And so I said, well, how are you? But to the church. And we got nothing, right? And then they're driving like freaking maniacs, dude. And they're driving fast, and they're passing cars. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So we get there and we stay in this little apartment with the mayor and his wife, and either it was his mother or his mother-in-law was there. And she's like a typical, what you would picture like Russian babushka, right? Like she
Yeah.
just had that feel to her. And I'll never forget, I let the dog, they had a dog that lived with them, and I let the dog into the guest room where I was staying. And I guess that dog wasn't supposed to be in there, because she came in and jerked that dog off the bed and cussed me out in Polish. I have no idea what she said to me. But during that time, we visited a Polish farm and spent time with the farmers there and saw what their life was like. But here's the thing that was significant. So I go into this church, and I know I'm just talking about my experiences, but I'm trying to help people understand how it can expand your worldview. We go into this church, and dude, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, and you keep in mind, like, this is 2002, 2003, so we're not that far removed from, them being part of the former Soviet Union or whatever, that whole thing.
Yep.
And so they were just defeated people. And my thing back then was healing and faith and all of that. And so I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? Like, their big thing was, come quickly, Lord Jesus, when we, someday we're going to all fly away, oh glory,
Exactly. Hoping for the rapture.
And so I had 3 shots at him, and all I did, I preached hyper faith, Derrick. I preached hyper faith, and I knew I was crossing the line with it, but I was trying to build them up to a place where they weren't, right? So I'm trying to encourage them. So I'm just preaching this sort of hyper faith message. Well, then on the last night, we had a full-blown miracle service. There were people there that had conditions for 10 and 15 years that were being completely healed, people being healed of all kinds of stuff. Like, it totally blew their minds. So now all of a sudden, I'm the man of faith and power.
Right.
So they tell me about this guy that's in ICU in their local, and they want me to go pray for him. And I'm like, what's wrong with this guy? And the best a translator could do, the translator was from Canada, but had been living in Poland. And the best she could come up with was like an ulcer on the brain.
Oh, wow.
It was a result of some kind of virus.
Yeah.
That was the translation I got, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, ooh, wow, So we go, and this guy's like catatonic, but we walk in, it was like walking into a MASH unit. Like, this was their hospital. And to be honest with you, Derrick, it reminded me of my 8th grade locker room. And they had me put on some stuff on my shoes, and I don't even think I had gloves on. And I walk into this ICU, and this guy's laying there, literally like something you'd see in MASH. And they're like, do your thing. And I got to tell you, I had no faith in that moment, but brother, I was just like, I'm laying hands on this guy thinking, I hope whatever he has is not contagious. And so, I do my thing or whatever. And so then they got to get me back to Warsaw. So this guy, new guy, is my driver. And he says, they drive fast in America. Yes, he doesn't speak any English either. He says they drive fast in America. Yes, and I'm like, no, no. And dude, we are flying, and of course it's kilometers per hour, and I'm trying to
Yep.
remember, like 140, 150 kilometers per hour, whatever it is that we're
Yeah.
doing, and we're passing people on curves, going up hills where you can't see shit, and there's
Yep.
all these like wreckages on the side of the road that were just left. And dude, I'm telling you, all I could think was, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, dear Lord Jesus, if you don't get me to Warsaw safely, kill me now. Just let me, if we get in a wreck, just kill me. Because I ain't going back in an ambulance and sitting next to ulcer brain dude and that. I'm serious. That's a true story, 100% every word. And fortunately, I did make it there safely and everything. But I was so happy to get back into the United States. Now, again, this is 2002, 2003. I was so happy to be back in the United States. Like, I'd never been so happy to be a U.S. citizen, just be able to bypass that big line of people that are coming back in,
Yep. Yep.
customs. And some of that was because we were more advanced, our hospitals, whatever, more advanced, but also it's just the familiarity of it.
Yeah.
Like just being there a week, the familiarity of the culture. And so all of that to say that our familiarity forges for us a lot of our worldview and ideas about people and things and situations. And it's uncomfortable to be outside of that familiarity for any length of time. So I could repeat that story. I mean, we, wherever we worked in Western Europe, other places in Eastern Europe, Russia, South Korea, Africa, we were always staying with people that were part of the country and part of the culture. So it was a wonderful experience, and definitely expanded who I am as a person.
Yep. Absolutely. And I'm gonna respond with a story because many of you know that I grew up in Detroit, but what you don't know is that I was born in a town called Decatur, Illinois. Decatur, Illinois. And I remember we moved from Decatur, Illinois to Detroit on July the 3rd, 1967. My mom and my dad decided that they were going to part company. My mom was going to go back to Detroit where she grew up, and she's going to take her kids and, she's going to go and be with her parents. Okay. Um, I was 4 years old, had not yet turned 5. And I remember that for the first 5 years that we were in Detroit, I absolutely was pissed with my mom because Decatur was my world.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked the house that we lived in and the room that we had and the yard that we had and everything. I just liked everything about where I grew up. So
Mm-hmm.
we're in Detroit, and Detroit is so foreign to me, and it was harsh, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't fully adjust or acclimatize to Detroit until I was like maybe in the 8th grade. Well,
Mm-hmm.
anyway, um, I remember the neighborhood that we grew up in. I hated that neighborhood. And every opportunity I got to spend time with family in different neighborhoods or whatever, I did it because I wanted out of there. And so by the time I reached the 8th grade, that's the first time I got a 10-speed bike. The 10-speed bike, 10-speed, racer with the curved handlebars and everything. And when you had that, you could go places, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I was able to leave the neighborhood, and then me and some of my buddies, we would ride our bikes to Canada, right? Because you could ride over the Ambassador Bridge for a quarter, right? And you didn't need passports or anything back then. You just ride your bike over the Ambassador Bridge and go to Canada. And I was just thinking about how awesome this was, and getting on my bike and riding out to Redford or Livonia or Southfield, or East Point, you know, the areas outside of Detroit, out of Detroit, and I was like, okay, this is good, and even some of the neighborhoods within Detroit, like Palmer Woods and Sherwood Forest and University District and Rosedale Park, and I went to all of these places, and then I got a car. You know,
Mm.
I turned 16. Well, let me backtrack because at one point I went to live with my dad in Burnsville, Minnesota. Now I'm going to tell you something. This is why travel is so important because I grew up in Detroit. And Detroit was blackety black, black, black. You
Hmm.
know, culturally, demographically, et cetera, et cetera. So I go to live with my dad in Burnsville, Minnesota, and I shit you not, I was one of six black kids in the entire
Yep.
fucking high school.
Yep.
You know, so this was a culture shock, but I had to make some decisions about how I was going to socialize. Am I just going to try to live in my own bubble or am I going to try to expand my horizons? So that travel to spend a year with my dad in Minnesota, that was transformative
Hmm.
because
Sure.
I learned things about music. I learned things about different cultures.
Yep.
Because there were people in Minnesota that there were a lot of people of Swedish or Scandinavian
Yep.
descent, but then there were like people that were of Belgian and other different cultures, and then there was a big Native American culture that was there also. So I got exposed to all of this and different music, different TV shows, different ways of working, and all of this stuff. Um, so I get back to Detroit and then I get a car. And so now I'm able to go not only to different neighborhoods, but different cities. I'm able to drive to Canada. I'm able to drive to Ohio, drive to Indiana, and all of these things. So I'm seeing and experiencing different things. Then I joined the Navy.
Mm.
And all of a sudden now I'm going to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois, north of Chicago. And
Hmm.
I leave Great Lakes and I go to San Diego. And so in San Diego, I'm going to NTC. I'm going to Buds. I'm going doing all these different things.
Hmm.
And then I leave San Diego and I go to Norfolk, Virginia, and I get stationed on the USS Nassau. And this, um, the NASA, the name Nassau, we made an acronym out of it, and the NASSAU was never again seeing soil after underway. So in other words, once we deployed, we were out. We're gone, right? So we're going all over the world. We're going through the Caribbean, Central America, South America, Europe, Asia, North Africa, East Africa, West Africa. We're going all of these different places, and and it was just it was mind blowing. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is that when I was a kid, I used to read about all of these different cathedrals and castles in Europe. And then I'm in Europe and I'm able to actually see these places and touch these places and be around the people that grew up around these things. And I'm thinking, you know, this is amazing. I mean,
Hmm.
and I'm thinking to myself, like, here I am, this kid that grew up in the hood in Detroit. Here I am. I'm in Salisbury looking at the cathedral. I'm in Notre Dame and I'm looking at the cathedral. I'm in Heidelberg and I'm looking at castles and cathedrals, and it's just mind blowing.
Hmm.
And then also, meanwhile, I'm eating dinner with locals, with French, with Spanish, with English, with Greek and Italian families. And when I came back from my first deployment, Aaron, I was really a different
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
I mean, I was totally transformed, and so now I'm not just this guy from the hood. I'm a world traveler. I'm seasoned. I've been places and done things, and I even got to do some things that other members of my crew didn't get to do because I was in Israel and I missed ship's movement. Now that's normally a bad thing, but I was okay because I had a 3-day pass, right? That was signed off on. But I wound up going to Turkey and spending a couple of weeks in Turkey waiting for my ship to get close enough where I could fly out to the ship. So I got to see some things that other people didn't
Sure.
see.
Right.
Um, so what am I getting at with all of this is that when I look at, people will say, "Oh, well, uh, we can't have socialism in this country because blah 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 blah," right?
Right.
Well,
Right.
well, I've been to Finland, I've been to,
Right.
Norway, I've been to Sweden, and I've seen how it works. I've seen how these people live. I've been
Hmm.
to Iceland, and I've seen how happy these people are. So I'm thinking to myself, I said, okay, why is it that we can't do this here? Because I've seen it succeed there,
Right.
and all of that. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes and experienced it with my own senses, then I may have been in the same boat to say, well, we can't do that here because that's socialism.
Yeah.
Socialism is not going to work. We're a capitalist country. It's just not going to work here. Mm, not so
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
Go ahead, man.
No, I think the contrast is important. I think what I'm hearing like is when you experience contrast, when experientially with your senses, right?
Yeah,
Um, then it's different than just reading about it or buying into somebody's narrative about it. Gosh, so many different ways to take this. But since you're talking about, socialism, when I was in Poland the last time, I think that was 2012 or 13. Um, they were still shocked that we didn't have universal health care. Like they couldn't get their minds around universal health care,
yeah,
that we didn't have it. And you say, okay, well, that's a former communist country, but you also have to understand they have in Warsaw a Ronald Reagan memorial, because they credit Ronald Reagan more than anybody, even more than the Pope, who was Polish at the time,
yeah,
for their freedom from the communists.
yeah.
And they hated communists. And I'm going to tell you, you want to talk about, I've probably never seen more, and it's understandable. I want to be gentle with my remarks here, but I'm just going to say it. I've never seen more bigotry
Mm,
towards a people group than I saw from the Polish people. And I love Polish people. They're some of my favorite people on the planet,
mm.
that I've interacted with. But I've never seen more bigotry towards Russians, towards a people group. I've never seen a people group that hated another people group as much as they hated the Russians.
Yeah, yeah,
And then I went to the Ukraine and I was in Kiev and I expected the same kind of response about communism. And everybody I talked to there was like, no, we had it good, And I remember one guy telling me, as long as you were a good boy,
yeah,
we had it really good. And, you would assume, okay, everybody that was liberated by, capitalism or the West or whatever would feel the same way. But no, the feelings are very different in different parts of the world. But I will say this. When they invaded the Ukraine, when Russia invaded the Ukraine, and everybody's saying they're going to walk over them in 90 days, I said, no, they will not. Those are some of the toughest motherfuckers I've ever been around
real.
in my entire
That's real talk, man.
You
Ukrainians
are
are some tough
not.
sons of bitches, man.
But I was able to have that perspective because I was like, no, I've been there. Like, there's no such thing as lying. There's like, if you're polite, you ain't getting food at
Yep,
McDonald's, or you aren't getting on the airplane,
yep,
because there is no such thing. And they are just, it's one thing to be poor in Kenya where you're by the equator. It's another thing to be poor, because I went to the Ukraine in February. Like, it's another thing to be poor in a frigid country with no heat.
yeah,
Like, it's just a totally different thing. And I remember going over there, and I ended up catching the flu and then catching pneumonia, and I couldn't get cough syrup. They didn't even know what it was. I couldn't get. I tried to get vitamin C. I had to pay off the pharmacist. You had to go to the pharmacy to get vitamin C, and the guy was going to give me like 500 milligrams a day for the time I was there.
mm,
And I'm like, like I need like 5 times that much.
yeah,
And I paid him €100 to just break the law. Basically, I probably should be admitting this
yeah,
online. But but just the the point I'm trying to make is the contrast, and not really being able to fully understand it until you're immersed, at least in some level, and actually have experiential uh, interaction with that. So I guess, I realize not everybody's going to have the same privileges and opportunities, but if I could say anything to, people watching or listening, don't take someone else's word for it. Don't be so quick to take someone else's word for how the rest of the world is, because it's so nuanced and there's so many differences. And you can do this just in the United States. So this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it over to you. But I was just thinking about, you were talking about Minnesota. I spent 2 weeks in Minneapolis, and it's a different culture.
Yep.
It's that Protestant work ethic,
Yep.
combined with sort of the Mennonite feel
Yep.
that's in that area, or Little Rock, Arkansas. Like, I remember preaching in a church just outside of Little Rock, and everybody's packing heat,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and there's just a certain way that they think, and that's totally different than preaching in a church in Venice Beach, California.
Yep.
Or I spent 3 weeks in Anchorage, Alaska, or and so, or I remember, last thing I'll say, I spent a couple weeks in New Jersey. I really have. I've had a cool life, I have to say.
You have.
And, I met a priest at a event in Illinois, Chicago, just outside of Chicago. And we became friends. And at that time, I thought Catholics were next to the Antichrist, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That wasn't quite that bad, but you get it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was right there with you, man.
And I meet this guy, and I burn out. So I go to spend 2 weeks in a Catholic rectory in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. And I'm hanging around with the folk, right? Like, and they're all Catholics. And I remember another funny story. I remember I go into Catholic service. Now, if you were not raised Catholic and you never really been in a Catholic service, it's an experience.
Yep.
Because there's a whole ritual and culture to it that I knew nothing about, right? And so we're standing, we're kneeling, we're doing all this stuff. But then it comes time for the sign of the peace, right? They said, give everybody sign of the peace. And I kid you not, Derrick, and I mean, I'm like 30 years old at the time, right? But I kid you not, I thought, what do I just like go around like the sign of the peace? That was the only reference I had in my brain for it, right? And all these people start shaking my hand and saying, brother, the peace of the Lord be with you, or something, peace be with you, right? And I guess I'm supposed to reply, and also with you. But hell, I didn't know that. And the looks on people's faces, like it was so offensive to them when I'm just saying, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You heathen.
This is an Irish community, and they had a statue of a green little boy with a little like green like bowler cap practically on his head, right? And there's all these candles lit to him, and I'm like, what is this over here? I'm asking after the service, I'm asking the father, like, what is this over here? Oh, that's the child of, whatever. You know how Catholics do, like the Mother of Guadalupe, or whatever. That's the child of something. But it was a green Jesus. It was a green child Jesus that you lit candles to. And in order to light a candle, you're supposed to give a $2 donation. And dude, my people skills. Like, I couldn't help but think of Better Off Dead.
Yeah.
Or the little paper boy shows up at odd times, like, I want my $2. And so I asked him, what happens if I light a candle, say a prayer, and forget to give my $2? I'm going to have a green Jesus showing up in my dreams saying, I want my $2.
Where's my $2?
But this group, so I remember being at a party, and this family owned a swimming pool, and I'm talking, there's probably 30, 40 people around there. And the father announces that we're going into the city the next day. Now, Perth Amboy's right there, like right there, right? You can just catch the ferry. You can practically walk to the ferry and catch it over into like Manhattan. And they freaked out, dude. They're like, you're going into the city?
Babylon.
Like, we haven't been in the city in 20 years.
Oh my
Make
God.
sure you hold on to your wallets, you know. Don't get lost, you know. Your wife might get sex trafficked there or something. I mean, so it just goes to show how you can get locked into a worldview. And even America is incredibly, incredibly diverse.
Yeah, it really is. You know, like we were in Miami, and I work for a very diverse global company. And so there were a lot of people there from the EU, a lot of people from London, from Ireland, or from England, Ireland, Scotland, Belgium, France. It is people from all over the place. And so they had this view of America from what they seen in the movies. New York City, New York City was the paradigm. And
Mhm.
so the thing is, they're like, oh well, we'd walk to dinner, and they're like, are we going to be safe? Are we going to get mugged? I'm like,
Mhm.
I mean, first of all, safety in numbers. Second of all, Miami is a pretty safe city
Mhm.
downtown, and you know, third, it's like you're buying into a stereotype, right?
Yep.
Your
Exactly.
worldview is
Correct.
limited based on what you've seen, in television and movies, right?
Mhm.
So, anyway, um, one of the things I want to ask everybody in the audience is like, for those of you who are seasoned travelers, where is your
Mm.
favorite?
Yeah.
Excuse me, still nursing this cold.
Mm.
Um, where's your favorite travel destination? Where's the coolest place that you've been? And for me, the absolute coolest place that I've ever been, wait for it, Moscow.
Mm. I believe that. Yeah.
It was let me say this. I served in the military during the Cold War. And during that time, the Soviet Union was our mortal enemy.
Mhm.
The only good Ruski is a dead Ruski. That kind of thing. And going to Moscow, and because I'm in IT, I'm working with a bunch of other IT types. And the IT types in Eastern Europe are almost exclusively ex-military. They're all ex-military. So a lot of what we did, Cold War stuff, brinksmanship with the Russians and all of that. These were guys that participated in that. But what I found was that the hatred that we were taught for the Russian people was not taught to the Russian people. They embraced us, showed us incredible hospitality, introduced us to things that were off the tourist track in
Mhm.
Russia, um, and just really befriended us, made us like extended family. And it was really really interesting, the level of camaraderie and welcoming. I don't think that I've experienced that anywhere else in the world. Anywhere.
Yeah.
So my favorite is Russia. Now I also have another story leading up to Russia. This is a travel story, because I work for a large multinational company, and I got involved in a pre-sales deal in Eastern Europe. And so the sales lead, now this is a guy who's selling eight figures in software and services sales. So this guy has incredible juice. So he says, "Okay, Derek, you're coming over here with me. I want you to call travel and have them mimic my profile, and I,
Mhm.
I want you to fly to Budapest because this was the first place that we're
Mhm.
doing this pre-sales deal, Budapest, Hungary."
Hmm.
And so I called travel and I said, yeah, Bill tells me to call and have you guys mimic my profile or mimic his profile. They said, well, he's executive platinum sales. You're a consultant. You have to fly coach. He's flying first class.
Hmm.
Okay, cool. So I called Bill back and I said, hey, they told me that I have to fly coach. He says, well, call your boss and tell him I told you to approve this ticket. So
Hmm.
I call my boss and I tell him, I say, hey, man, uh, Bill wants me to mimic his profile to go over to Budapest to do this pre-sales deal. And he said, fuck you, man. This is exactly what he said. He said, fuck you. This guy's flying first class. I'm not paying for you to fly first class, right? You fly coach like everybody else. It's okay. So I called Bill back and I said, hey, Bill, my boss told me, because actually what he told me, he said, hey, go fuck yourself. I'm not going to pay for it. That's what he said. That's literally what he said. So I told Bill, I said, hey, he told me to go fuck myself. So he said, give me 5 minutes. So he calls my boss back, and then my boss calls me back, and he says, I just approve your fucking ticket. Click. you know? So, so anyway, we did multiple cities on this implementation: Budapest, Hungary, Bucharest, Romania, Warsaw, Poland, Kiev, Ukraine, and Moscow, Russia.
Mm.
All five of those cities, I flew first class on
Wow,
Lufthansa.
that's great.
You
Lufthansa
know,
is a good airline.
it is, it
It
is,
is.
and that's like one of my favorite travel stories. But in each one of those things, in each one of those deals, like there were people uh, from all throughout Eastern Europe that were working on these things. And again, the Soviet bloc, behind the Iron Curtain, these were
Yeah,
our mortal enemies.
yeah.
But none of the, I mean, everybody was just so accommodating, and they were, oh my God, you're an American, man. Let me take you out. Let me take you out to drink. Let me take you to to dinner and all of it. And it was just absolutely insanely good. But Moscow was the pinnacle of it. I mean, but all of the other cities in Eastern Europe, the same level of hospitality. But Moscow was the pinnacle of it.
Yeah, the Russians are very hospitable people. I think this brings up a good point for me. Um, People are people, man.
Yeah,
I mean, I've spent time with the various different groups that I mentioned already, but one of the things we did when I was in Kenya, and so on the border of Kenya and Tanzania is the Maasai territory, and the Maasai, well, when I went, they still lived like when I went the first time, they still lived like they lived thousands of years ago, um, off the land.
hmm
Really hadn't been influenced much by uh, modern culture, Western culture, anything like that. And so I'm talking about, lion hunting. Like I'm talking about rites of passage for males. And I'm going to
yeah.
tell you what. Okay, okay, I have to take it back. I said the Ukrainian people were some of the toughest people I ever been around. Ain't true. The Maasai people,
And Maasai's are
they
pretty
take the
tough too.
cake.
But you were right about the Ukraine, the
Yeah,
Ukrainian.
yeah. But these guys, their rite of passage to become a man in the community, not only do you have to hunt a lion with a spear, now you have other men around you, so it's not quite like it sounds. But this is the worst part. You have to be circumcised at like 14
Mm,
without any, and it's not a medical procedure.
damn.
It's basically we're going to take a knife. This is like Abraham.
Uh,
But here's the thing: they teach them to go into a meditative state and not feel the pain, because if you feel the pain, you have disgraced your family and you're banished from the people.
whoa.
Like if you flinch. Yeah, exactly. But what I
Ouch.
can what I can say is that we all basically want the same things. We all have the same. I mean, humanity is humanity. We all love our families. We all want to do better. We all care about the people that are important to us in our lives, and we all have enemies. You know,
Yeah.
um, and I guess that's what kills me. Like when I hear people, and I don't want to be too controversial on this because I don't know a lot. I don't know enough about it to speak on it. So that's my disclaimer. But when I hear people taking sides in this conflict between Palestinians and Israelis, like in the midst of all of that, there are people who are suffering. There are people suffering on the Palestinian side. There are people suffering on the Israeli side.
Yep.
And we're so quick to just, this is what bugs me in this country. We're so quick to demonize the other as though they're all or nothing, right? Like they're
Right.
all evil or they're all good. None of us is all evil and none of us is all good. We're all a mixture of something,
Yep.
right? And we're all doing the best we can with what we have. I really believe that. And I don't know why it's so hard for people to take that perspective, but I'll tell you, last story I'll throw out there. Last time we traveled out of the country was 2 years ago. I think we took a cruise and we visited different places in Mexico, and we took the kids with us. And now, granted, I understand that we're doing the touristy thing when we're on a cruise, right?
Mhm.
But we chose, you know, like you could go zip lining or you could go on a educational tour where we're going to take you out and we're going to show you the farms and we're going to show you, you know, how people live. And for the sake of our kids, if nothing else, we always picked those tours when we would go out because we wanted to educate them. We wanted to give them these kinds of experiences. And so we were just gone out of the country for 7 days. That was it, 7-day cruise. And we come back in, and all of us, my kids included, felt the hostility that was not present in Mexico or on the ship the moment we stepped back into the United States.
Wow.
And I'll never forget, we were in the back of the plane, and our plane was late. We're flying into, I don't remember where I have no idea right now where we switched. Let's just say Dallas, right? We had to catch a flight from Dallas to Denver. And the plane is really late, and they make this announcement, and they say, please let everyone who has to catch a flight, if this is your destination, please let everyone get off the plane first. And if this is your destination, get off the plane last, right?
Yep.
So we're at the back of the plane, and we're not flying first class. And we're walking up the aisle, and this lady steps out in the aisle, and we could hear them talking on their cell phone about who was going to pick them up at this airport.
Yeah.
What they were going to do when they got home. And she looked at us, gave us a nasty look, and then said to her travel companions, well, you're not going to just let them cut you off, are you? And my kids, they took note of that. And they're like, we're on the first leg of our flight, and this is what they said, we're already dealing with a Karen.
Wow.
And you can just feel it. So let me say this. In 2002, 2003, whenever it was, I went to Poland the first time. That was my first overseas mission trip. When I came back, I was so glad to be back in America. And my wife and I, you picked this topic. I didn't pick this topic. My wife and I were just talking about this week. Like, our roads here in Colorado are a mess.
Yeah.
They're a mess. Potholes, construction going on, and you never see anybody working. Never. Like, I don't get it. Like, these construction projects take 5 years, and like every time you drive by, like, there's equipment out there, but there's no people working the equipment, right? And our roads are a mess. And I remember coming back the first time from Africa in 2005 and thinking, man, I'm so glad we have nice roads. And my wife and I were just talking about, it's like, I don't really see a difference now between the roads we have now and the roads that we experienced back when we went to Kenya for the first time. And when we weren't in, the bush, we were, in metropolitan areas there. And I just got to say, like, so for my kids to go out of the country, for me to go out of the country for the first time and come back and think, I'm so glad to be back in America. And for my kids to go out of the country and go to Mexico and come back and be like, oh, we can tell we're back in America again because people are being assholes.
Wow.
So traveling also gives you that perspective of how things change. You're not the frog in the kettle anymore.
Right.
So that's what I would say.
You know
Oh,
what?
I wanted to mention just real quick. Sorry, Derek.
Yeah, yeah.
Marietta Hughes, she said thus far Alaska, but Westcliff, Colorado ain't bad. Westcliff is about 90 minutes from here. Um, and if I'm not mistaken, if it's not number one, it's in the top five of places in America, continental United States at least, that has the least amount of light pollution. So if
Mm,
you want to see the stars, you want to bring your telescope,
yeah.
that that's one of the places to go. So anyway, with that, I'll kick it back to you.
No, one experience that I had, like, I worked for a German company, and so between 1996 and 1999, or 1995 and 1999, I spent probably the equivalent of about 7 months in Germany during that time. And one of the things that you'll hear this all the time, people will talk about how bigoted and racist Germany is. And I remember coming back from Germany one time and having to go through JFK Airport, and a guy in customs said something very racist to me. And at first I was like, okay, I'm tired. Did I really hear this? And then he repeated it. And I'm thinking to myself, everybody talks about how awful Germany is. But let me tell you something. In all, I mean, Aaron, in all of the time, 100% of the time that I was in Germany, not one ethnic slight, not one ethnic slur, not once did I feel less than in Germany.
Yeah.
Not once.
Mm-hmm.
But I come back to my own home country where I've served in uniform, where I grew up, where I've traveled all over the place, and here's this goon in customs that's giving me shit about my ethnicity. And I'm thinking to myself, here's the thing. People have this, they have preconceived notions about people now, and so I want to go back to this whole thing about what you were saying about Israel and Palestine,
Mm-hmm.
because May and I were talking about this earlier, and you know I believe that Israel absolutely has the right to exist. I also believe that Palestine does too.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that until they come up with a workable solution for the two nations to coexist, you know, all they have to do is just acknowledge each other's right to exist and to be in this space. And from there they could build on anything. But I think that what happens is that you talked about taking the position of the other.
Mm-hmm.
That whenever we take the position of someone being the other,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we basically denigrate an entire segment of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, and this is the thing that I think that people miss, is that when you do that, when you dehumanize an entire segment of humanity, you're inviting that same spirit, that same dehumanizing spirit. And and this is the thing that I want. What I want everyone to see in this is that um, when you have the ability to travel and see the world, different cultures, different races, different ethnicities, different languages, different cultures, different foods, different ways of working, different ways of thinking. Um, what happens is that you begin to look at your own worldview in a how can I say? I don't want to say a diminished light because that's not what you want. You don't want to. You don't want to diminish your own cultural perspective or your own ethnic perspective or whatever. But what you want to do is you want to um, allow others to shine. And if you get to this point where you say, okay, I see the beauty in other cultures. I see the beauty in other languages. I see the beauty in other religions and all of these other things. I think that at that point, you create an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I guess if I had an expected outcome from
Hmm.
this discussion, it would be that you see things differently. And here's the thing: people will say, well, I can't travel because I don't have money. That's not an excuse. That's not an excuse. You can cross a state line. Listen, there is a world of cultural difference between, say, California and Nevada,
Hmm.
or Nevada and Colorado, or say Colorado and Nebraska. There are worlds of cultural differences.
Yeah.
And if you just commit yourself to saying, okay, at one point every at some point or season during the year, I'm going to commit to exposing myself to another culture, to another way of thinking, to another a way of eating, or whatever it is, right? And then here's what happens once you've built this appetite, this wanderlust, uh, for what's in this country, then you'll say, okay, how can I experience this somewhere else? And I guarantee you that no matter what your income strata is, you'll figure it out. You'll figure out how can I go to England? How can I go to Italy? How can I go to Algeria or to Morocco or to Kenya or to Ghana? How can I get to, how can I go to Israel? How can I go to Saudi Arabia? How can I go to Dubai? You'll figure it out.
Hmm.
And the travel industry is really catering to the lower to middle class traveler more so than I mean, because basically the wealthy, they're going to travel no matter what. But the greatest growth in international travel is with people who are from lower economic and different, ethnic or cultural demographics.
Yeah.
So the thing is that you can, whether it be in a mission trip, whether it be in a cultural exchange, whether it be just a simple vacation, whether it be a business trip, there are ways that you can do this. And if there's a call to action from this show, is get out there and see the world. I mean, get past what you know to be good, what you know to be right, what you know to be true, and find out what it looks like somewhere else. And if you do this, you will begin to set yourself up to be a vessel of change. And
Yep.
that's
Yep.
that's my thing.
Yeah. I think it's important too because like America's we're in trouble, man.
Yeah.
Uh, like this whole to take it back to the Middle East thing, like for like the people at Harvard and these Ivy League schools to not be able to completely denounce infantada.
Mm.
Like, what is that? What is that? I mean, I think it is the byproduct of the environment in this country.
Yeah.
I think it's the byproduct of, again, this black and white, not speaking racially, but in our thinking, this either or, all or nothing.
Binary thinking.
Yeah, about people, that they're all bad or they're all good and we're on the side of good, or this group over here, if they would just act right, everything would be right in the world. And so we're going to punish them or destroy them because then that'll fix everything in the world. I mean, I mean, we're frighteningly close to mentalities. And this pisses people off when I say this, but to me, we're frighteningly close in this country to the type of intellectual and social environment that gave rise to the Nazi Party in Germany in the 40s. I believe that.
Yeah, sad but
Absolutely believe
true.
that. And it's scary. It's scary.
Well, whenever you get to the point where you begin demonizing people because of an attribute, right? And there was something I've seen this before, but it came up again recently, and Sinclair Lewis, the author, um, said that when fascism comes to America, it will come draped in a flag and carrying a cross.
Of course.
And here's the thing: is that fascism actually came to this country before. Um, the Nazi way of thinking was alive and well in the
Yeah.
United States. There was a big rally or a series of
Yeah.
rallies that were held in Madison Square Garden, of all places. Um, the Germans learned about apartheid and eugenics from the Americans.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I mean, that we bear a lot of the shame of what happened in Nazi Germany, and to your point, Aaron, it's like it is this kind of thinking that we're dooming ourselves to repeat this kind of shit, and but I let me say this, and this is where I'm gonna stop. I'll shut up after
Okay.
this, and I'll call it done. Um, One of the things that has been a blessing to me, and I use that word very carefully now, but one of the things that's been a blessing to me is being able to break bread with people of different cultures
Hmm.
on a regular basis.
Yep.
And I said this to, there was a multicultural group of us in Miami this week, and I said, listen, if blacks and Indians, whites and Palestinians and Indians, or whatever, if we all committed to saying every week, I'm going to find someone of a different ethnicity, a different culture than my own, and every week I'm going to commit to having dinner with someone outside of my own cultural, ethnic, racial strata. I really believe that if everyone in let's start with here in America, that if we just started with that we could change the world.
Hmm.
Because one of the things that I found, I had dinner with some Indian colleagues, and they had told me about how they were told how black people in America behave. But they had dinner with me, and they realized that what they had been fed was a stereotype.
Hmm.
And so their minds got changed.
Hmm.
And likewise, there were things that I had heard about Indians in America that once I actually sat down to break bread with them and understand where they were coming from, I realized that I was way off base. Way off base. And so Aaron, I'm going to use you and I
Yeah.
as another example because I mean, you have an almost back to the Mayflower kind of story that
Absolutely.
It's the quintessential white American story.
Yep, it is.
And so me, on the other hand, I grew up in inner city Detroit. Our backgrounds couldn't be any more different. But we've committed between the two of us that we're going to talk about things and to share our experiences. And so as a result, Aaron, I am a better human being because of my experience, my shared experiences with you. And
Mhm.
I think that the same for you with because of
Absolutely.
me. So if we can if you and I can do this, imagine if everyone, I'm not saying even everyone, let's just say maybe 25% of Americans. 20, I mean, that's a pretty significant number, but in the big scheme of things, not really big, right? It's one fourth. But let's say if we could do that, what kind of changes will we see?
I I honestly think that's what it's going to take. And that's one of the reasons. I mean, that's kind of how we started this show, right? Like, let's
Yep.
model this, how you can take highly charged issues and have conversations about them and grow in real time rather than whatever it is that people do today on social media. But let me illustrate a point. This is a story that I heard. I didn't witness this firsthand. But you talk about Indian culture. Oh man, I have a person in my life that's Indian from Asia, like,
Yeah.
um, and she'll tell people in my community that she's Indian, and they will ask her. They will literally pose this question to her: feather or dot?
Wow.
Can you
And,
believe
and I
that?
know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was just appalled. But anyway, so I'm not generalizing Indian people because India, like the people probably don't realize this, but the largest uh, English speaking newspaper back when there was still newspapers, I guess, in the
Yeah.
world was not the
It's
New
in
York Times,
India.
or the London Times, it's the Indian Times, right? So it's a massive country. So I'm not generalizing, but I'm going to tell this story to share how the map, excuse me, the map becomes the territory if you don't expand your horizons. In other words, the way you think is the way the world is. That's when the
Yep.
map becomes the territory. So I heard this story. this this guy gets invited from India as a preacher. He gets invited to do a tour of some churches, preaching some churches in the southern part of the U.S. Right,
Hmm.
and in his particular culture, and again, I'm not saying this is every Indian, but in his particular culture, they sort of play this game where if you are invited to, if someone has you in their home and they offer you food and you accept it the first or second time, it's considered rude. And I suppose the idea is that resources are scarce or whatever, but they know they should offer you food.
Hmm.
And so I'm offering it to you, but I'm only offering it to you because I'm supposed to offer it to you. And
Right.
so that you're supposed to say no. And then I'll offer it to you again. So it's the way we figure out, are you really hungry? Do I need to share my resources with you? So apparently, after about the fourth or fifth time you're offered food, if you really want it, you say yes.
Yeah.
But if you say yes before that, it's considered offensive.
Mm.
Now imagine this guy going into the southern US. Hey man, you want something to eat? We cooked up some food here. Come get some. Oh, no, 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 I'm fine. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm fine. Okay.
Yeah.
So this guy apparently went like a long time without eating.
Oh shit.
he complained he complained to the person that coordinated it, who was uh, fluent in both cultures, let's just say. And it's like, yeah, like you didn't tell the truth.
Wow.
But this guy went to my friend who coordinated this and said, these people in America, they're so rude, they're so offensive, they didn't take care of me, they didn't feed me, they didn't offer me any food. Because in his culture, you don't actually accept on the
Right.
first or second
Yeah.
request. And these guys like, okay, well, that's more for me. I mean,
Wow.
so I just think that's a funny story about how culture can so impact our thinking about how the world is, and we can transfer it to other parts of the world, other people, other cultures without realizing it's just a map. It's not the territory.
Yep. Aaron, I think that's really, um, I think that's key to the discussion. We make the map the territory,
Mm,
and we need to not do that. In other words, the only way to not make the map the territory is to get out of our own headspace and
mm-hmm.
actually get out there and explore.
Yep. With humility, without saying my way's the right way.
Yeah.
It's a different way. Doesn't mean your way's wrong.
Yep.
It's just different.
That's it right there, dude. That's with humility. With humility. And the one thing that I've learned, um, is that just because America's the big dog in the world or whatever, it doesn't necessarily make the American way the right way. And the one thing that travel has taught me, Aaron, it has taught me humility.
Yeah.
So
Yep. All right. So what do you want to do now, Derrick?
yeah, we could take a look at some of the comments. I've put I put some of them on the screen, um, but the one thing that I want to ask everybody that's watching, if whether you're watching live or if you're watching on replay, put your favorite travel destination in the
Yep.
chat,
Yep.
and why. Why is that destination your favorite? And then also, um, favorite travel stories, anecdotes from when you traveled abroad, or traveled from one state to another, or from one city to another. Um, we really want to know, because here's the thing that I think that, another thing is that we like to share all of the good stuff that we do, but we don't share the difficult, the challenging stories. You
Right.
know that when we met with, some cultural resistance, and I think that those kinds of stories are essential, to weaving a fabric of of broader thinking.
Let me share this. When I was in Africa the last time, um, always before I had traveled with companions
Hmm.
who were white.
Mm.
This last time I went, I was by myself and met my friends there in Kenya. And I was literally the only white person in anywhere. And it gave me a fresh understanding and appreciation, because it became uncomfortable for me after just 7 days that I stood out so much because the color of my skin was different than everybody else around me.
Mm.
And it gave me a taste, right? Like a hint of what it's like for Black people in America, particularly in my town, because I mean,
Yeah.
you know, that just how uncomfortable that can be, that you're standing out just because the color of your skin is different than the culture and everybody else around you. And
Mm.
so I would just say that off of what you just said. Um, yeah, that it was a good moment. I remember the moment. I remember where I was. I remember what I was thinking, and nobody treated me in any way, shape, or form as less than. Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. If anything, it was the other way around. But
Yeah.
just recognizing from a sensory perspective, because we started this out by saying you need to experience this, you need to see it, feel it, taste it, smell it,
Yep.
and to have that sensory experience and see how it impacted me internally was really profoundly eye-opening, honestly.
Mm.
So Ben Urban says here, should I watch The Ninth Gate or Rosemary's Baby? I would say Johnny Depp is more adept as an actor than, say, Anton LaVey. So I would say Ninth Gate.
Ninth Gate. I'm with you on that. So Ben, Ninth Gate, not Rosemary's Baby. But listen, if you're gonna be up late, watch the Ninth Gate and then Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, of course, Jeanette says Rosemary's Baby. Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, I think this was good. But again, to everybody that's watching either live or on replay, really look at your life and say, you know, could I benefit from going beyond what's comfortable to me? And,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's really what it comes down to. And we've talked about this before about comfort zones and why you should violate them. I just really think that if you're going to be alive, be growing, and if you're going to be growing, then that means experiencing different things, doing different things,
Yeah.
being around different people, different cultures, have a different experience.
Yeah.
But this was once again, my brother. This is
Yeah,
a
it's
good one.
worthwhile. It's worthwhile. I enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely.
It's a good reminder for me to just, take in all of those experiences and broaden my perspective
Yeah,
and how I think about things today and going forward.
absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, this is interesting from Ben. I just saw this. Next episode, you two will have listened to Bad Omens, The Death of Peace of Mind, and we'll be ready to discuss it. Please and thank you. Are you familiar with that, Derek?
No, I'm not. Is
No,
this Bad Omens the TV show or Bad Omens the musical group?
I have no idea.
All right, Ben, we're gonna depend on you to kind of unpack that a little bit.
Or is that too much cannabis water for?
No, it's like the Bad Omens TV show is absolutely amazing.
Okay, so I just Googled it. So apparently there is a song by Bad Omens called "The Death of Peace of Mind."
Okay.
So that's what he's talking about.
All right. Well, I'll definitely dig into it, and if we jointly agree that that there's
Yeah.
some substance there, then we'll definitely talk about it,
Yeah. All right.
and we'll make Ben real happy.
Yep. All right.
All right, bro.
I guess that we have come to the end of another Phreology Friday.
Yep.
So chicken grease, hair grease. I can't remember what I used to say.
Peace,
Peace.
and hair
That's a
grease.
peace of mind. Peace and hair grease.
Thanks for coming to our TED Talk, and thanks for growing with us in real time.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for watching.
All right. Love you guys. Aaron, love you, man.
Love you too, Derek.
All right. Peace.
Peace.